Hello, I'm Bas Hamer from Possum Labs, and today I'll be talking about utilizing defaults, and I'm assuming that you're building your solution based upon the PossumLabs.DSL.English library. So let's hop over to Visual Studio and take a look at the tutorial. So, first of all, let's take a quick look at this scenario. What we have is a user, and now we have a ticket, and a ticket requires a user. This is very common in most line of business applications where you have a dependency on other types of entities. Right? The entity you may be testing or are interested in may require multiple levels of hierarchy. And defaults is there to simplify things, because what we can do with defaults is the following. We can just say given the ticket, and we don't specify the user. And by decorating our entity, we can actually have the framework itself behind the scenes populate this user from a default. Another way you can utilize it is, for examples like the one below, where we want to log in as a user. So we want to create the user. Well, the user isn't really being used after that, so it's kind of noisy. So what we can do is we can say logged in as user default, or if you want to, you can just specify the following and say given logged in as user. All of this is what we can support because of defaults. So the magic for this lives in two places. It lives on the user and on the ticket. So let's look at the user first. For the user, we specify the following here. All right, we have this initialize default method, and we specify a delegate, which actually creates a user and returns it. This is only getting called if you are using defaults. So in the first example, like that first scenario in our feature, this guy, that method will never get executed. But in the other ones, it will. So what ends up happening is that when the system is asking for a default user, it will understand that, hey, this is how I can create a default user. And then on the ticket, we do the following. When we have our ticket object, right, here's our public class ticket identity. We have a property called user, which is a user, and then we have a property on here of an attribute on here called null coalesce with default. You can either call it null coalesce with default, or you can say default to repository default. Both of these will do exactly the same thing, just depending on what name you find more descriptive. The first one is better for English, the second one is better for computer science. I don't really have a preference between the two. So by making these two changes, we now have the ability to utilize users in a default capacity, and it allows us to both create data with a default user property, but also to do the following where we log in as user default, or we just say we log in as blank. That's about it that you have to do to support defaults. This becomes very valuable in cutting down on the clutter when it comes to complex data hierarchies, which happens a lot in line of business applications. And I will see you guys back for validators, and then we'll have a final example of creating actually some complex data and how everything would work together. Thank you very much for your time, and please let me know how these tutorials are in the comments below. Oh.